They say a mother's love is the only thing stronger than a king's decree. We want to believe that. We need to believe it. But in the winter of 1342, inside the frostbitten stone of Blackwood Keep, love didn't just fail, it became a crime scene. Imagine waking up in a bed of silk, knowing the person who whispered you to sleep, the one who rocked your cradle, has been sharpening a dagger for 10 years. Waiting for the exact moment your heart was most open to tear it out. He buried the secret that night and thought he was safe. But in the next hour, we're going to dig up a body that should have stayed buried. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. What's the weather like in your corner of the world today? And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. To understand the blood on the floor, we have to understand the men who built the house. King Alaric was the iron foundation of the Northern Reach. To our American viewers, think of him as the ultimate self-made titan, a man who carved a kingdom out of raw wilderness with nothing but grit and a very sharp sword. He was 45, hardened, and obsessed with one thing: legacy. But Alaric had a problem. A silent, haunting problem. His queen, Helen. Helen was the trophy queen, beautiful, high-born, and silent. For 10 years, the tragedy of Helen was the talk of the realm. Every month, the royal physicians would enter her chambers, and every month, they would leave with their heads bowed. In the 14th century, a barren queen wasn't just a disappointment, she was a death warrant. By year 9, the king's patience had evaporated. The whispers in the courtyard were turning into shouts. Alaric was preparing a retirement for Helen, a cold cell in a convent, or perhaps a more permanent solution involving a sudden illness. But then, out of the midst of the Great Famine, came Abigail. Abigail didn't arrive with an army. She arrived with a basket of herbs and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She was a healer, a woman of the woods. While the king's doctors were using leeches and prayers, Abigail was actually saving lives. She worked her way into Helen's inner circle until she was the queen's shadow. Imagine the psychological grip. You are Helen. You are hated by your husband, mocked by the court, and fearing for your very life. And here comes a woman who whispers, "I can give you what the king wants. I can make you a mother. I can make you powerful." But what the king didn't know, and what Helen was too desperate to see, was that Abigail was a ghost from the past. Her husband had been executed by Alaric 10 years prior during the Purge of the Southlands. She didn't come to save the queen. She came to turn the queen into a suicide bomber. What time is it where you are right now? Is it late enough for the shadows to start playing tricks on you? Let us know in the comments. In the spring of 1341, the impossible happened. Queen Helen announced she was with child. The kingdom erupted in joy. Alaric was transformed, he became the doting husband, showering Helen with gold and security. But behind the closed doors of the nursery, a horror movie was being filmed in slow motion. Abigail had convinced Helen to fake the entire pregnancy. For 9 months, they lived a lie. Abigail handled all examinations. She convinced the king that the spirits had warned that if any man touched the queen's belly, the child would be born cursed. Alaric, superstitious and desperate for a son, obeyed. But you can't fake a birth. Abigail's plan was chillingly tactical. She began scouting the local villages for a woman who was pregnant, poor, and, most importantly, unlikely to be missed. She found a young girl, barely 18, and promised her a life of luxury in exchange for servitude. In reality, she was a human incubator. December 12th. The night of the Great Frost. The king was away at the border, leaving the castle under the watch of a skeleton crew. Inside the nursery, the screaming started. It wasn't the sound of a woman in labor, it was the sound of a woman realizing she had sold her soul. Abigail arrived with a bundle wrapped in wool. It was a boy. The replacement. But this is where Abigail's true motive revealed itself. She didn't want a fake prince to rule. She wanted the king to watch his dream die at the hands of the woman he supposedly loved. She handed the dagger to Helen. "If you want to be free," Abigail hissed, "kill the lie. Kill the child, and we will tell the king it was a stillbirth. He will mourn, but he will not blame you. But if this child lives, he is the evidence that will hang us both." The head guard, a man named Miller, reported hearing a rhythmic thud, like a butcher's block. He burst into the nursery to find Helen standing over the cradle, her white nightgown drenched in a color that looked black under the moon. But when Miller stepped forward, he didn't find a baby. He found a pile of bloody rags and a message written on the floor in the king's own ink: "The king's blood is spent. The harvest has begun." The queen was hysterical. Abigail was gone. And the infant, the prince, was nowhere to be found. The manhunt was the largest in the history of the Northern Reach. Alaric returned to a home that felt like a tomb. He didn't just want his son back, he wanted the skin of the woman who took him. But here is where the detective work of the 14th century takes a dark turn. Investigators found a hidden passage behind the nursery walls. Inside, they found letters. Hundreds of them. Not between Helen and a lover, but between Helen and Abigail, detailing every step of the deception. The king realized his entire miracle had been a meticulously choreographed play. What's the weather like where you are today? Is it cold enough to make you shiver, or is it just this story? Let us know in the comments, we're reading every single one. The queen was executed for treason and infanticide 3 months later. She died screaming that the baby was still alive, but no one believed a madwoman. Abigail was never found. Until 10 years later. A young boy was caught poaching on the king's land. He was brought before a broken, aging King Alaric. The boy wasn't afraid. He looked the king in the eye and showed him a signet ring, the king's personal seal, which had gone missing the night of the crime. Abigail hadn't killed the baby. And she hadn't let Helen kill him. She had stolen him. She raised him in the woods, feeding him a diet of hatred and lies. She told him every day, "Your father is a murderer. He killed your mother. He stole your birthright." She didn't need to kill Alaric with a sword. She killed him by turning his own son into his assassin. Alaric didn't execute the boy. He couldn't. He saw his own face in the child. Instead, he gave the boy the crown and walked into the blizzard, never to be seen again. The boy, Silas, grew up to be the most brutal tyrant the realm had ever known. He was a king forged in betrayal and raised by a ghost. The hand that rocked the cradle didn't just hold a dagger. It held the future of a nation and carved a path of blood that we are still talking about today. Was justice served? Or was the queen just another casualty in a war she didn't understand? What do you think happened that night in the mind of Queen Helen? Was she a villain, or the most tragic figure in history? Let us know your theories below. And if you thought this was shocking, wait until you hear our next story, The King Who Fed His Children to the Wolves. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it. This is Velvet Scandals. Stay safe. And remember, watch the hands that rock the cradle.